Well, greetings to everyone. We're going to have another little short installment here for our ExoCommerce. I've been wanting to contribute more to this particular website. I've been very, very busy. And so anyway, today we're going to take the opportunity maybe to look at a few things that might be helpful as you contemplate what might come next in your journey. Certainly, I hope all of you have had the opportunity to be aware of some of the recent happenings on the planet with the certainly with the full moon, the eclipse that was on the 15th of this month. And then again on the 22nd, there was some significant astrological or astronomical events happened, and there's a certain amount of energy that became apparent, and I did see the result of it. Some anticipated happenings, which I can't go into at this time, but some anticipated things which we had been working on actually were finalized at that point. So things are moving forward and making a little bit of progress as it seems here on the planet. I know a lot of people are watching certain events. Uh, and so maybe we'll have a chance to comment on some of those things as it becomes more finalized. Right now, there's quite a few things in flux, especially in the international financial community and so forth, as arrangements are trying to be made to put this thing right and get it all straightened out. So we expect some good things here shortly. Now, that's not the subject of today. Today, I wanted to go over a few things that might be helpful for understanding of our circumstances here, and perhaps it might be that we can look at some positive things that can be done in some areas to help you get your life in order. We talk a lot about enlightenment, people waking up. The term ascension is brought up many times. Others like to refer to it as an uplifting. So whatever you want to call it, it has to do with people becoming aware of themselves and the circumstances of the planet where they find themselves at this time. I think everybody across the planet are very well aware, certainly by this time, that we're not alone in the universe, and there's a lot of things going on out there, and some of it's becoming very apparent here on our planet, and certainly as we watch the skies, as we see the videos on the internet and so forth, listen to the comments of a great deal or a great many people who are experiencing these things and sharing them, then certainly so we have a lot that we can look at. Anyway, one of the first things I want to discuss today is a problem that has gone on for uh, centuries. And also, the reason I say that it's a problem because it has the tendency to drain energy away from what we would call productive pursuits and redirect those energies into darkness. So these are important things to take a look at, and so I'll just launch right into it. It has to do with what we would call the dark cabals or Illuminatis, or just however you want to talk about this thing. I hate to put titles on things because when you put a title on something, you really kind of limit your perspective in the sense that once you title something, then uh, you pretty much stop thinking about it. And so when we start talking about some of these things that are going on of a negative nature, we say things like cabals or dark side or I don't know, new world order, some of these things. And so when we put those titles and labels onto things, and then we use them for reference, but in many instances we don't go back to analyze the situation because we've already labeled it a certain thing and then we have either a positive or a negative connotation on the word itself, which sometimes leads us not to further investigate the circumstances, that gave rise to the title to the thing. So anyway, the first thing I want to refer to here is basically a negative drain of energy uh, that could be used for better purposes. I'll put it that way. You have to understand the energy itself is neutral, but it's the use that we make of these energies that determine what we would call a good or a bad results. So as long as we're in the world where duality exists, we seem to have this constant battle going on between good and evil, as some would say, or some might say the light and the dark. And this has been played out on this planet for countless ages. Obviously, if you've studied history, uh, and so this is not this on an individual basis. As sometimes we act good, and sometimes we act bad. And some days we have good days, and some days we have bad days. And then if you move into the larger perspective, where you have large numbers of people, even countries, nations. Well, certainly on the planet. I mean, we know that the Earth is revolving from day to night to day to night to day to night. And it's a natural part of our world as far as light and dark. And then, like I say, the influence of huge groups of people, such as countries, nations, large organizations, and so forth, they're in the same boat. They have to determine, what we would call good or bad or whatever. And so anyway, we are operating, at least on this planet, in our third dimensional concepts. We're dealing with a duality. Uh, duality is fairly linear thinking, and so we tend to classify things under duality, and the problem never seems to resolve itself. So anyway, for whatever reason, we do have those who favor the light as a way of living, and we have others who seem to prefer living totally in darkness, and their works and the things they do always seem to be of a negative or a dark uh, circumstance. Now, one of the elements here in regards to those who operate in what we call darkness is basically that they're miserable. And it's probably because, once they look inside of themselves and cannot accept their own divine creation, they become bitter. And as a result of that, resistance to their own divine creation, they take on a certain amount of anger, as it seems. And since they cannot vent out against the Creator, which is the source of their creation, then they try to take out their anger on everybody else or upon others of the creations that are here. So they try to destroy the earth, they try to destroy the environment, they try to destroy the planet, and they also try to destroy their fellow men. Now, they are demonstrating some sort of an internal anxiety or angst that they don't seem to be able to shake off, regardless of what they do. Now, it is possible for such individuals to get to the point of no return. I think we have indications of that from time to time. We see some that simply have gone so far in a negative direction or position that there's no turning around. And so eventually these types will simply have to be taken back to source for what we would call, I guess, annihilation. That is, their very essence and identity would be returned to native element, and they would be remembered no more. No man knows their fate. And so anyway, when you start thinking about some of these things, we need to consider. In any event, uh, I think such individuals do have a sense of what's coming, a certain inevitability. about the prospects of the future, but acting again in a typical sociopathic mindset. They seem to want to destroy as many others as they can before their final destiny catches up with them. So we have some of these problems. Now, what had some years ago, as I was studying into some of these things, uh, what amazed me was these families or these generations of people, these cabals and so forth. I couldn't understand how they were able to perpetuate, their designs, generation after generation. I couldn't think in my mind why the rising generation simply wouldn't say, "Hey, we're not doing that anymore," and they would stop it or break away from it. But as I studied more and more about mind control and satanic ritual abuse, I started to understand how they could keep up the darkness from one generation to the other. It also involves some of the control of what we would call the reincarnation cycles and what are known as walk-ins. Now, in essence, what happens in some instances is that when one of the dark ones actually physically dies, the soul, or some people call it a soul, some people say a spirit, whatever it is, it's the energetic uh, infusion that causes the physical body to move about. So I'll just call it soul. Anyway, the soul of so when one of these dark ones dies, the soul that was in that body simply seems to just hang around waiting for an opportunity to get into a new physical body. And what they found out years ago was that if they traumatized a new baby, a new infant, or even adults, uh, that the life force or the soul that was in that body would simply leave. I mean, if you inflict so much trauma and it becomes too much to bear, the soul of that body will simply vacate it. They'll go away. And so that leaves that entity or that physical body open, for other opportunities. And some of these ones that are hanging around waiting for an opportunity to inhabit one of those bodies, then they go into that body. And so this is how these uh, generational families and so forth have been able to maintain their direction, generation, to generation, because they simply come back and inhabit. The same souls, that were perpetuating the thing, simply come back and inhabit a new body. Now, I don't know how they're able to control that. I really don't. Uh, there must be some mechanism or some technique that they use to guarantee they can get into that particular family situation. And let me say this too about walk-ins. I've known several, and they knew they were walk-ins, and for the most part, the ones that I've dealt with have been basically very benevolent, humanitarian types, environmentalists, so forth. As a matter of fact, I met a fellow. Oh, it's been a few years ago. I had known him, or he had been at some of my seminars. So I had met him in the past, and then he wanted to come and have some private time in a kind of like a little private workshop. And the first thing he told me was, he says, "I'm not the same person you knew." He said, "That guy left." He said, "I've been in this body now for about 9 months." And so once I got in the body and could use the brain and so forth, apparently he needed some explanations about some of the technology. So I said, "Well, okay. I'm just as happy to talk to anybody as the original guy, I suppose." And so I think he was going to use the technology for some good things. But he wasn't the original entity that I had met, a couple of years prior to that. So anyway, this is how the generations are able to maintain their efforts. Simply put, the same entities just keep coming back and back and taking on new bodies of the same genetic family. And the technique that they used for a long time to force out the soul that entered the new baby was sexual abuse, in an effort to traumatize and influence the rightful possessor of the new body to leave so that dark ones could come in. Some of you perhaps are familiar with the information and work done by one Fritz Springmeier. If you want to go on the internet, there's quite a bit of information that's been posted by Fritz and others. And so again, his name is Fritz Springmeier, Springmermeier. If you simply just do a Google search for that, some of his information will come up. I've looked at his information for years and years, and it certainly explained a lot, put it that way. Anyways, if we go on, over a period of time, probably as a result of the Korean War, the United States, the CIA, started to see the value of mind control. And so they, around that period of time, they started to investigate it very closely, delved into it. And so immediately, of course, they came upon the same techniques that were being used by the satanic ritual abuse people, using sexual trauma to split personalities, to compartmentalize them, and so forth. And so the CIA said, hey, we can use that. And there's quite a bit of information on the internet about some of that. I think a lot of people probably are familiar with the term Manchurian candidate. And so that's a part of it. And then there's certainly quite a bit of information, especially regarding some who have been turned into sex slaves. I think Kathy O'Brien, if you look her up on the internet, she reveals quite a few of the terrible things that happened to her. Anyway, in the first instance, the CIA was using the same techniques that had been used by the satanic ritual abuse people, and then they said, well, this is basically, they said, this is taking too long. So they tried to speed up the process by the use of chemicals and drugs. In other words, they would traumatize people with some of these chemicals and drugs and so forth to see if they could induce multiple personalities, see if they could cause the original soul to flee and so forth. I think that was the original reason why the CIA wanted to try out LSD. And they ran a lot of experiments with it. And I'm pretty certain that what they expected to happen didn't happen in all situations. Apparently, LSD has different effects on different people with different body chemistry. So some people who might have a bad trip were in one category, and then other people simply had hallucinations, and so it didn't cause trauma to them. So after they experimented around with certain drugs and so forth and so on, didn't get all the good results they were looking for, then they started to work with electronics. Because again, the purpose for what they're doing is to try to take control of or drive out the original soul that was in that body so that they can take control of it and use it for their own purposes. Now, as it turns out, these individuals, and you can read all about it, I mean, it's pretty disgusting stuff. But even though they developed chemical techniques and developed electronic techniques, being the perverts that they were, many of them, they still resorted to the sexual trauma. And so certainly we have these many accounts of pedophilia. Now, I think if you go on the internet, if you haven't already, and read or study the works of a man named Kevin Annett, Annett, he has done quite a bit of work. I should say monumental work in this area. to try to get this business of pedophilia and uh, put to an end. So go look at what Kevin has done, and I think you'll be glad that you did. Anyway, these are kind of disgusting things that I'm talking about here, but what I wanted to show what was that in many instances, energy, again, which is neutral, energy itself, neither good nor bad, but there's a lot of energy that's being drained away from people that if it were refocused and redirected to then we would have a positive results, from the use of it. For instance, you can put gasoline in your car and you can drive it to go do good things, or you can take that same gasoline and drive your car off a cliff. You see, so in one instance, the energy is being used for good. The other instance, energy doesn't work out so well. So, okay, now with all that understanding about energy, I think we should turn our attention to what we would call a positive use of this energy. And how can this energy be used to influence the circumstances around us? How can we join that energy to the energies perhaps from other places? For instance, we've had a huge infusion, certainly since December the 21st of 2012, and ever since then. And just recently this month, again, when we had the lunar eclipse, or what's called a blood moon, and subsequent astrological events, then there has also been an opportunity for more energy to flow into the planet. And so as we receive that energy, as we join our energy with that, and so there's much more that can be done, especially in the areas of personal enlightenment, awareness, self-realization, and all those kind of things. So we want to redirect our thought process here to consider some of those things and how they would be of benefit and interest to you. Now, one of the great teachers on the planet and a master of truth, this fellow was called Jesus of Nazareth. Now, some people have given him all kinds of titles. Some call him Christ, or Son of David, or Son of God. All the titles go on and on. But again, remember, when you restrict yourself to a title on something, then you might be shortchanging yourself. So I just referred to him as Jesus. That's a common name that a lot of people get all worked up over his name, and I don't know why they do. But anyway, what's key here is not so much what we call him, but what he had to say that was of benefit, to those who are working toward the light. And we could just as well be talking about another enlightened individual. We could be talking about Buddha or Mother Teresa, Gandhi. There's been a lot of enlightened souls on this planet that have shared with us. And so in this particular instance, I'm just going to refer to the one that I'm more familiar with, who is this historical individual known as Jesus. Now, in the King James Version of the Holy Bible, he's reported to have said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Now that's how it's translated in King James. And whether that's exactly accurate or not, I can't say. As you understand, the Bible has gone through many translations, over the centuries and so forth. But let's take a look at this concept, and let me express it in this way. Let me just kind of give it how I would think that the implication was being given. And so I would say it this way: I am the messenger who has been sent to deliver the truth and bring those who learn the truth to the light. And no one can return to the source of light unless they learn the lessons which would bring them to that light. And so does that kind of make a little bit clearer, perhaps, what he was trying to indicate there as it was reported and translated in the King James Version? Okay, so for those of us who prefer light over darkness, and I hope you do, so we have a way, or we have a map that we can follow as we move toward the light and leave the darkness behind. And the message of Jesus and these other teachers has always been one of love. And so love is the greatest barrier against the darkness as we work ourselves toward the light to what has been called unconditional love. So these are concepts that perhaps you might want to consider and study on. So as we develop this unconditional love in ourselves, then we start to ascend, as it were, maybe even to the extent that Jesus ascended up and a cloud blocked the view of those who looked up. Now, this begs the question, of course, is it possible that we others could repeat that? Like, I would suppose that it is. And just one hint, some of these ET UFO ships hide in clouds. And for those of you who watch the various YouTube videos that come on from time to time, many times you'll see a UFO, go in and out of a cloud. So they're hiding in the clouds. So if you could learn how to levitate, perhaps, or learn how to ascend, who knows? Maybe you get a ride on a spaceship. Something to think about. All right. Now, there are several words that are presently being bandied about: ascension, uplifting, self-realization, fourth and fifth, dimensions, age of Aquarius, and a lot of these different words that are being bandied about and so forth. But basically, these words describe the quest, that many of us are on to remove ourselves from the darkness we experience here in the physical world, with all the hindrance of the constant mind control that's being beamed at us all the time. I mean, there's several who have commented upon the electronic impulses and so forth that are constantly being beamed at us from microwave towers. Now, I've done a great deal of research on mind control, and I would suggest that many of you might want to go and take a look at some of those things yourself. We don't have time for that here. But I've done a great deal of study of this over the years. Now, sometimes people say, well, it seems like I'm making 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Well, I've heard that. But I think that many, who are moving and are working their way toward light are becoming more and more enlightened. I mean, I see it. And the struggle that they're experiencing is just ridding themselves of their own blockages. Restrictions that we have put on ourselves. And so in a lot of instances, we can't blame, somebody else, the CIA or the big sky in the eye, or big eye in the sky, all these kind of things. I think many of the restrictions that people suffer with are simply limits or restrictions that we put on ourselves. And so sometimes it seems like we have a huge millstone hung around our neck. And so different ones have, larger or smaller millstones, as the case may be. But in essence, then, the effort is individualized to the extent that everyone is just a bit different than all the others. But the same principles can be used by all. And so it's the principles we're concerned about, when we get into some of these things. And I have to say, we do have help from external sources. Some like to say ET, some like to say angels, some talk about prophets or ascended masters or a whole host of entities which have come to assist mankind in this quest for the light at this present time. But then, of course, one must use discernment when dealing with these others who come around. We are always wise to test these entities, as there are many which are actually deceivers. And I would suggest that we test these, uh, and not just what they say, but what they do. I mean, talk, like we always say, talk is cheap. You know, and so it's not just a matter of saying things, but it's also a matter of doing. Now, for instance, I had a friend some years ago who had heard that there were some Pleiadians who were landing regularly in Peru and working with the native people there. So he went there. He went there and he found them. And he talked to them. And he was really impressed, particularly with this one Pleiadian lady. She worked with the native people there, teaching them, educating them, teaching them about herbs, how to heal, and do various things. And so this Pleiadian lady was putting her money where her mouth was. She was helping. She was doing good things. And then too, I've read countless messages and what's called channelings over the years from a variety of people and sources. And so I had to have some kind of formula to judge those writings or those channelings by. And so there were a few tests that I had come up with, and basically I came down to this measure. If the people who heard these words would use what is being said, would we have a better world or a worse one? And so it's not just the words being spoken or heard, but the real test is the implementation of whatever message is being given. So we need to test these things. And it appears that the messages from the ETs, some perhaps from Pleiades, some from Andromeda, Sirius, and so forth, are spoken from a higher dimensional thought process. So many of the things which have come, for instance, seem to demonstrate a fourth dimensional logic and reasoning. And so sometimes, those who are still linear thinkers in the third dimension, will misunderstand the logic and reason of what's being said from a higher dimensional position. So we have to take these things into consideration also. Well, it makes sense to me that we would take what is given, try to work it out. It's like taking a seed, planting it in the ground, and see what kind of plant the seed will produce. If the seed grows up to be a useful plant, then you know the seed was good. If the seed grows up into a weed, we don't do that no more. so, so it's just not what's said is very important, but what those words can produce. Okay. One interesting thing that I have found that you might want to go and research and do watch some of the videos. I came upon a fella. Apparently, he's passed away now. His name was Dr. Frank Stranges, Stranges. And at one point, he had made contact with a man from Venus. This fellow's name was Valiant Thor. And he had actually come to the Earth on his ship, on his spacecraft. I think the name of his craft was Victor 1 or Victor 2 or something like that. Anyway, he landed right down there, not too far away from Washington, D.C. Went on up, got into a conversation with President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon. Oh, brother. In any event, what Valiant Thor had presented to President Eisenhower was a well thought out and laid out plan that Val told President Eisenhower, if it would be implemented, it would bring peace to the country and also prosperity. So he presented that plan to President Eisenhower for consideration, and I don't know how long it was before Eisenhower came back, but he finally came back and said, no, we can't do that. Said if we adopt your plan in this country, he said it'll destroy our commerce. Exactly. I mean, didn't Eisenhower complain about the military-industrial complex, and then to reject Valiant Thor's plan, seems ludicrous. Why wouldn't he? And so I don't know what. There were other circumstances, I'll put it that way. Apparently, by that time, Eisenhower had entered into some treaties with some of the other extraterrestrials, some of those grays we talk about and whatnot. But in any event, apparently Val hung around the Pentagon. I think he lived in the Pentagon for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Anyway, that's where Dr. Frank Strange's first met him, was actually in the Pentagon. And so go on. There's several presentations by Dr. Frank. Also, a friend of mine knew Dr. Frank quite well, and so he verified, some of the things I was watching on the internet, because he had knowledge of those things as well himself. In any event, after Val had hung around for a few years, and he went back to his ship, his spaceship, and moved it down to the shore of Lake Mead in Nevada. It's just, for those of you not familiar with that area, Lake Mead is kind of south of Las Vegas. Anyway, apparently Val has parked his ship down there and cloaked it. Uh, I suppose it would be possible to find it. I don't know. I was talking to a fellow a while back, and he said that, yeah, he said there's some places, some paths you can go down toward Lake Mead. He said, and a park ranger will stop you and tell you to go back. You got no business here. And so, scratching my head thinking, well, probably maybe that's the area where Valiant Thor has his ship uh, docked at. Now, I don't know why he's still here, why he's hanging around for. He must have other things to do. And so I would suspect probably we'll see more of him. You go on the internet, they got photographs of him. I mean, there's photographs of the fellow right there, so you can see a spaceman right on the internet if you want to. Anyway, personally, I would like to see a copy of that plan. I'd like to see what provisions and what recommendations that he had made. I would suspect that many of the things that we have developed in solutions in commerce, some of the technology and so forth, would probably go hand in hand with the proposals that were being made on that plan that had come from Valiant Thor from Venus. And we also had other ambassadors who have come on this planet from Venus. Uh, I'm going to put on the website here a book that I found. It's about round wing aircraft and so forth. And in this book, and this guy documents it. I mean, I think his book was published in 1980. Anyway, he documents quite a few things. Has a bibliography if you want to go check it out. But anyway, he had talked about quite a bit of interaction, uh, especially in the area of development of round wing aircraft, and this helped it come from Venus. I mean, quite a few technicians. There've been a few ambassadors that have come from Venus, for various reasons and so forth. So this is not uh, way out there. I mean, Venus ain't that far away. And there's also the rumor that Nikola Tesla was actually born on a ship en route from Venus to the Earth, was actually taken as a baby and placed into a Serbian family to be raised by Earth parents. What that was all about, I don't know, but it was. And then for those of you who watch weird television, I did see a clip on the internet from the Jerry Springer show, and there were two ladies there that he was interviewing on his show, both of whom reported having come here from Venus. It's kind of an interesting interview. And I'll also say that Venus has people. Venus is hollow, just like the Earth, and so they have people living on the surface. They have people living on the interior, so forth. And from all appearances, it seems like the people there have advanced fairly high in their enlightenment or in their spirituality, and they're hoping that we can advance like they have, so they can have more confidence in what we do. Now, on the other side of the coin, there are some other ETs that are here. This is an interesting story too. There's a fellow named Charles J. Hall. Charles J. Hall. And Charles apparently was in the Air Force as a weather observer, and he was stationed near a place called Indian Springs, Nevada. Now I'm very familiar with Indian Springs. I used to work up on the Nevada test site years ago, and leaving Las Vegas, you go right through it. Matter of fact, you have to slow down on the highway when you get to Indian Springs. And so, yeah, I'm very familiar with Indian Springs, although I wasn't at all aware of the story that this fellow reports. Well, apparently, he reported on being involved with what he calls the tall whites. And these were people, and he never could find out where they were from. Uh, they said, well, we could tell you where we were from, but you still wouldn't know it. And so they never really told him. But in any event, he had quite a bit to do with them for a few years there while he was the weather observer at Indian Springs. And basically, they had come onto the Earth basically for uh, uh, a station or a place where they could fix their craft. He saw some of them come in from time to time that were damaged, perhaps with meteor collision. So they would bring them in, and they would fix them up. And sometimes they would even get parts and supplies to fix their craft from the Air Force. And so that's a very interesting story. And these people don't have any particular benevolent reason to interact with mankind. As a matter of fact, he said that they like to go into Las Vegas and do the things that people do, gamble and shop and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it's quite an interesting story. They're simply just using the planet as some place to land, fix their planes. They have personnel there. They have families that live there and stuff. It's kind of interesting. They generally live to be about 700 or 800 years old, and some of them apparently had some memory of the founding of this country. And so they've lived through all those things, and apparently they've been there for a long time. I guess they're going to stay there for a long time. I don't think anybody wants to fool with them. But in any event, there's an example of extraterrestrials that are right here on the planet all the time. They've been here for a real long time. They ain't going nowhere, but yet they have no interest at all in interacting with mankind. So it's kind of an interesting anomaly that we're looking at. Different than the Valiant Thor story, you see. Okay, so let's, with all those things said, let's get back to this concept of ascension, because there's some things that I want to point out in regards to this. Sometimes people have used, or maybe you've heard the word used, expatriation. Now, you can expatriate whatever. You can expatriate from a jurisdiction. You can expatriate debt. You can expatriate money. And so anyway, you might want to study that word, the implications of it. But one of the goals of ExoCommerce, is to inform the viewers that we do have formulas and techniques here presently, which could facilitate we Earthlings to do commerce with people or entities from other places outside the Earth. And for years, I've been lecturing as solutions in commerce to help move people to freedom or free will using the commercial redemption technologies. And as people remove the shackles of debt and liability, then they can start to ascend or to spend their time on more spiritual pursuits, rather than spending all their time looking over their shoulders, worrying about bill collectors, the IRS, and the revenue agents such as the traffic police and so forth. And I've heard many who are working in spirituality and ascension who say, I am ready to get out of here. I want to move on to higher dimensions or even to another planet. Well, I can certainly sympathize with that sentiment, but there's a problem with that, is that, just to go somewhere else and still drag around all the karma that you didn't get rid of here seems to be a bit self-defeating. I mean, if you got a problem here and you go to Mars or Pluto or something, you take the same problems with you. What have you just accomplished? And so karma is just a debt. It's just a liability. It's just what we have to deal with. And there's many ways that have been suggested is how to deal with karma. But or debt. But can we just go away somewhere else for a fresh start? with having not learned the lessons that we came here on this earth to learn. Wouldn't it be better to roll up our sleeves and get things in order before we contemplate moving on, whether to a different planet or even to a different dimension? So every debt has a remedy, or what we would call a redemption, and in essence, then before we expatriate from something such as the earth, we need to tidy up before we go, and so we need to get our accounts in order. So let's take another look at the example that Jesus showed to us, and there's a lot to be learned from this example. Now, one author that I had read who was making comments about Jesus said that he was considered to be a perfect man because he kept all of his contracts. Now, I don't know that he ever contracted with anybody here on the physical plane. I mean, I don't know if what he had, what he did there, but it seems obvious that he had contracted with God before he came here. In the scriptures, it he refers to him as the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. So we know that there was something that was contemplated for before he came here, and then apparently when he came here, he fulfilled that contract or that responsibility. Now, is it possible that you and I contracted before we came here? With God or the Creator or whomever you want to call. Is that possible? And I suggest that it is very much possible. And so if that's the case, then we would want to fulfill our contracts and our commitments while we're here. And so why would we want to leave before we got that done? See. Anyway, when you read the story about the death of Jesus, as he hung on the cross, he uttered the words, "It is finished," or at least that's how they translate it. So anyway, hanging on the cross, he said, "It is finished," and then he gave up the ghost, or what we would call he died. Now, what do you imagine that he meant by that phrase, "It is finished"? Could it have meant that he had completed the physical portion of his contract? In other words, the contract had been executed. So now if you follow the rest of the storyline, after his death, as it were, his soul or his spirit went into the world of spirits, set the captives free, as you can read there in the New Testament. And then after 3 days, his spirit reanimated the physical body. And then he went about for a while doing some things that we have records of, and probably doing some things that we don't have records of. But anyway, eventually he was able to expatriate from the earth, which is generally known or called the ascension of Christ. But the key here is he didn't leave any unsettled debts or any unexecuted contracts when he ascended. See, so this is an important concept. Now, aside from being an interesting and faith-promoting situation, there seems to be an underlying message or in this example. Jesus having executed his contract, and as the New Testament phraseology says, being made perfect. That's what it says. It says being made perfect. Anyway, he expatriated or he ascended, and a cloud received him out of the sight of the onlookers. Now, back to me and you. In our present situation, we have become encumbered in all manner of contracts. Some of it we do with knowledge, willingly or voluntarily. Well, if we didn't do that, how could commerce move forward? So we do contract, but for good reason. But a lot of liability upon people is created by fraud and subterfuge, as in adhesion contracts and constructive contracts by implication and so forth. Now, we've studied a lot of this information and technology or thought process, with our solutions in commerce presentation. Now, are there any remedies for these problems? Can these fraudulent contracts be dealt with? The answer is yes. But it takes a bit of study, it takes some technology to deal with some of these things. Now, right now, there's a lot of excitement going around about what's being called the RV, or the revaluation of the currencies, and the global currency reset and so forth. And these are important and timely things, however it works out. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding among the people generally about what's going on with that. But anyway, those are a couple of things that are going on right now. but even the reset does not deal with the existing debt problems. And so we still have Shakespeare's Shylock running around and taking his pound of flesh all the time. So how do we get that stopped? And so anyway, a lot of people have been relying upon something called NESARA, NESARA. I can't remember what that acronym stands for. Anyway, NESARA. For those of you who are not familiar with that, you can go study the history of it. And so a lot of people are looking at that like that situation for debt forgiveness. Now the question gets to be: can NESARA forgive a debt that NESARA is not the creditor of? Obviously not. And so we're looking at a different situation here with dealing with some of these debts. So actually, I'm working with someone now who does have the wherewithal. I mean, he's got the numbers in the accounts to do it, and he has agreed to pay off the world's debts, not to forgive them in the first instance, but to pay them off using his bank accounts. And then when that's done, then he can forgive the debt to whomever, because again, he would be the holder of that debt. So that's being worked on too. So when we start talking about expatriation, we're talking about quite uh, a bit more complicated a process than most people uh, consider. Because again, if we're going to ascend, if we're going to expatriate from this dimension, if we're going to expatriate from this planet to another and so forth, we need to take a close look at our circumstances, because we don't want to drag the same crap with us that we're dealing with here. Get it cleaned up. So now perhaps we have a proper perspective on the issues that we're facing as we work out our hopes for ascension and so forth. And it becomes necessary for us to roll up our sleeves and start to sweeping and mopping until we get the thing cleaned up. Hey, listen, folks, uh, everybody needs to go to work on this. And I don't believe that we can merit the intervention of the extraterrestrials unless or until we have done everything that we can do. Now it may get to the point where we've done everything we can do. There's nothing else that we're capable of accomplishing, and at that point, then perhaps we could expect some intervention. But don't go looking at the sky and say, "Hey, come on down here and mow my grass for me." Come on down here and cook supper for me. Do everything that you can do to and then maybe you might be able to interpose or to get uh, the people who are circling the planet to come and do something for us. So let's just not depend on that until we've done everything that we can do to get these things cleaned up. And so what I've done with solutions in commerce over the years is simply to provide technology that can be used for the cleanup. And a lot of people have used a lot of those things successfully, some unsuccessfully. That's true. Many people have been able to accomplish many things with the brooms and mops, that Solutions in Commerce has brought up over the years. And so, hopefully, we've made an effort by what we've done, and we have some expectation that when the ETs land, or when the ascended masters, slow down their vibrations so that we can talk to them directly, and so forth. And so we have a certain amount of expectation, that we will have the opportunity to be involved with some of these individuals, entities, and so forth. And so anyway, as the work being done to deal with the dark cabals, everyone can do their part, but simply not doing business with them. Like Jesus said, he said, resist evil, he said, and it'll flee from you. So that's pretty much the presentation I wanted to make today. Give a little bit of information about the circumstances that we're working with. Give a little bit of hope. That there's some brightness out there that you can work toward, and to encourage you to not lay it off onto somebody else, but to take the thing yourself and do all that's within your power to do to clean up yourself first, and then certainly uh, uh, your world. A lot of people ask me, Winston, could some of these technologies, techniques, and so forth that you're using help to clean up the environment? Yeah. Could they help to uh, prevent some of these atrocities that are going on? Yeah, they could. Not all of them, certainly. We don't. I don't have a fix it for everything on the planet, but I do have a fix it for a few things. And so if we can accomplish those few things, then perhaps we will have done our part. And perhaps at that point, then we would actually merit, some kind of intervention, from those who hopefully will come to help. Anyways, this little presentation actually went a lot longer than I thought it would, but with this little presentation here, I'm just hoping to get back to the ExoCommerce concepts, perhaps give you some ideas, things to think about as you consider the situation and circumstance we live in. So hopefully I'll be able to get back with some more information here before too long, but until then, I guess we'll just have to uh, close her off, and I'll see you later. Thanks for your time.